Welcome to episode 605 of the Barcelona podcast, brought to you by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I'm Dan Hilton, and after the Juan Gamper Trophy, a 3-0 loss to Monaco, there isn't much to talk about with the match, but today I thought it would be a little bit of fun to, after having seen the squad list, having seen the presentation, try to figure out a depth chart today. On the stream that I had on Tifo for the watch along, not as many numbers as I would have liked. So please, I've already scheduled the stream, or if it's not scheduled yet, you can see that down in the link or description below. So click on that link, and it's Ola Culés. It's Ola Culés. That is the promo code. It's free to come in. 3:30 is when the season begins. The Liga actually starts, so it's not just a Juan Gamper Trophy. It's not a preseason, anything like that. It's matches that matter. So please join me for the watch along. The link is in the description below with the promo code Ola Culés. Again, that is free to join. I'm going to have guests that you might know or you might not know. I'm going to have different ways to communicate with people, different threads, and that will continue to get more fun, that feed over time as well. So I appreciate everybody showing up for that and joining me in the watch along. And I can't plug it anymore. Let's jump into the depth chart. I mean, I guess we can do one thing about AS Monaco first. So that AS Monaco match, a 3-0. The reason why I throw it out is because all three goals were made by if you want to say that, were mistakes made by Barcelona teenagers that immediately led to the goals. And those teenagers are likely not going to all be on the field at the same time come the actual season, or bench players or Barca athletic players or whatever it is. So the first goal scored, really frustrating, but it happens to everybody. I was saying it on the watch along that Ilas Moriba, I believe, is the last young player that, and I think it was in that 4 or 5-0 win, or 5-1 rather, win against Hadafe, maybe his debut or second match, when he gives it away in the middle of the park. Hadafe or Real Valladolid, whoever it was, immediately come the other way and score. And it put a little bit of a blemish on a good match that he had. And I do believe that was his debut match. And for Bernal, hey, if he's going to do it in an AS Monaco friendly in the Juan Gamper Trophy in the beginning of the season where he makes a mistake, he doesn't receive the ball well, it's immediately taken away, scored on Ter Stegen, 1-0. Then the second goal was just Briel Mbolo, who, believe it or not, I've always thought, and I think most people, because they see him with Switzerland and they know he's been a player in more high profile leagues, that being the Bundesliga, and for quite some time, that they think that he should be at, quote unquote, bigger club than AS Monaco, but that's where he is right now at 27. And he just beats Sergio Dominguez, gets goal side of him and on of his shoulder, and finishes past him. And that's just, again, a mistake by a young player. And then the last goal was Hector Ford, who has not really had a great preseason, winds sliding in. And then Gerard Martin does not close down the angle. And then Iñaki Peña also gets beat at his near post. So Iñaki Peña, the one non-teenager, and Gerard Martin, also not a teenager in that collection of bodies. But that's how the three goals were scored. Pretty frustrating. I don't really have much other on the match to say, aside from, I thought Marc Bernal had a really good first half, and then not good to a poor second half, which is not great to see. But I also thought the intensity from Barcelona did lighten up, even after the first goal was scored. But even before that, the press in the U.S. impressed me. I know it's a lot of pressing going on, but I was impressed by Barcelona's press and organization in the U.S. And I think that, in particular, Lewandowski, I don't think this is an age thing or whatever, but come around the 20th minute, 25th minute, the intensity to Barcelona that they began with on that press, the control that helped them take on the match, he and they took their foot off the gas, and then Monaco found a lot more space, and the rest of this match felt like for both teams was going in second gear. And I said second gear was enough for Monaco to get some goals from teenager mistakes. So for all those reasons, I'm not too concerned because of all the good things I saw in 3 matches in the preseason in the U.S., as opposed to this one match against Monaco when you play in 6 days or whatever, 5 days against Valencia in that afternoon. Again, 3:30 p.m. on Saturday. That's East Coast time. And then 9:30 in Barcelona for the Liga opener against a Valencia side that is also figuring out and finding out which players they can register and which they can't. Which I think is a perfect transition to talk about the players that are registered in Liga and are not. So the list for La Liga registered players, and it's kind of silly to do this way because I think there are certainly players that are just going to be jettisoned to the sun. So I don't want to give away too much if you're watching, but the depth chart for La Liga, as far as the players that are going to play, so not depth chart, it's Ter Stegen, Iñaki Peña, Cubarsí, Christensen, Koundé. Ron Araujo was registered for the Liga. We didn't know if he would because of FFP and his injury, but he is. Eric Garcia, Langley was registered, and I'm not entirely sure what the reasoning for that is. I think it's because they do have to pay a portion of his salary, or expected to. They already know he's not going to be sold. So if he goes out on loan, Barcelona would be on the hook likely in these negotiations. He's got a huge salary. So I guess that's why they did that. Does that help with FFP? I'm not sure, or I've forgotten if I did know. Balde, Fermin Lopez, Pedri, Ferran Torres, Gundogan, Gabi, De Jong, Lamine Yamal, Lewandowski, Rafinha, and Ansu Fati. Not on that list was Inigo Martinez, who is not yet registered, and that story is pretty well publicized. Marc Castado, I don't think has been jumped up, as in he did agree to the renewal to a first team contract, so he will be in the first team, but I don't think he's just been registered in the Liga yet this season. I guess they might be able to use for August his youth contract until it officially needs to be official, which I think would be August 30th. So he might still be under a youth contract for the next month or so. Mark Bernal does have a youth contract due to his age. Alex Valle was not registered. We'll get to him. Hector Fort is still on a youth contract. Faye is on a Barça Athletic contract. Danny Rodriguez has re-signed for a Barça Athletic contract. Juniette is a youth contract. Andres Cuenca is a youth contract. Tony Fernandez, same thing. Guillermo, same thing. Gerard Martin, a Barça Athletic contract. Pablo Torre was not registered. We'll get to that. Sergio Dominguez, a youth contract. Vitor Roque was also not registered in FFP, but we kind of knew that when he came in January, that he and Inigo Martinez were going to be a problem coming the summer. So I don't know what to make of that. Dani Olmo obviously is going to be registered. Just that has not been done yet. And then Pau Victor, same thing. He's jumping from the Barça Athletic contract to this first team contract, having just been signed. And I don't think that goes official until August the 30th. So that's when August the 30th, I think, or maybe even before that, they get that work done and they get that paperwork in. You obviously know that back and forth of the paperwork is always a problem, but Pau Victor, Dani Olmo, and I guess Vitor Roque, I know would definitely be registered, would be a problem if Vitor Roque is sticking around, and Pablo Torre. I guess that's where we start with this list. I think this preseason and this AS Monaco game in particular told me that 4 players are gone, judging from the Liga registrations plus the preseason. Ansu Fati, the reports came out that were positive, that Hansi Flick liked him. They did well in preseason, but you can see a lot of reports on players that really need those, not only the confidence boost in the public, but just to let people who care about him know. So it just is an influx of how you're doing, what's going on, yada, yada, yada. So Ansu Fati is gone, I think, this season or this summer. I think they're looking for a permanent move for him because his salary and wages, I should say, is more than he's providing Barcelona at the moment. I think it's around 13, which he gives you production between 7 to 10, especially if he's a bench player. So it's a bit too much. And it was a deal that was signed because of how essential he was to the future of the club. And it's been rough since that time. Alex Valle not playing against AS Monaco concerns me about his future. And by that, I mean, I think he's going out on loan. Or more likely, if FFP really is truly a problem, because as we saw today, Nico Williams is going to wear the number 10 for Athletic Club. And I think that announcement, that video announcement from Athletic Club means that Nico Williams is not coming to Barcelona this summer. Who knows about the future, but not this summer. And so when it comes to, again, Alex Valle, I think you know that he's pretty much gone at this point. And if the club is looking for FFP, again, knowing that Nico Williams isn't going to arrive, then Valle is going to be shipped off, probably for a buyback, so you get more for the FFP as opposed to just a loan where you're still paying part of the salary. And then there's Langley. I think he is gone. He was registered in the Liga, as I already explained, for reasons I don't understand. Maybe those are reasons I'm speculating, but Langley is definitely gone alone. And then Pablo Torre, I think, even though he did start and play the first half against AS Monaco, he's the one player that, because of the depth chart, I think the talent is there. The fit, I already said in the preseason tour in the U.S. of that 4-2-3-1 for Hansi Flick is good for Pablo Torre and good for him as a player. But I think that there's too many other players that can give you what he gives you and can play in his position. I think he's too far down the depth chart. He just needs minutes and time, especially in, these are the formative years, 20, 21, 22, 23. If you're that talented, you have to be playing. So he can't just be sitting on the bench. I didn't mention Sergio Roberto, who is also gone, but that wasn't a question. We weren't going through that depth chart. We knew he was going. So by the time you're seeing or watching this, Sergio Roberto may have already done his press conference saying goodbye. All right, so I think we're done with all that stuff here. I would have loved to put Hansi Fati and Alex Valle on this list, and Pablo Torre too. I think he's a good player, and all three would be worth pieces. And as we're going to do the numbers as well, I've got 22 first-team players and 22 first-team contracts of the 25. And I mean, it's not a bad thing if Ansu Fati and Valle and Pablo Torre were numbers 23, 24, and 25, but that's not really how the club likes to work. And they do have the academy, so they really are using 30 players, even if they registered 22 or 23. We saw it last year as well. They played, 33 or 34 total players, and they only had, at the start of the season, was 20, and I think they ended with 22 registered for La Liga when the season ended. Okay, so let's get to the depth chart here. We begin up top. The number 9, you can complain all you want to me. It's going to be Robert Lewandowski as the starter more than any other. And I think the way I'm doing the depth chart is I think I'm putting it visually so you can see where I believe these players are going to play the most starts or the most minutes or whatever you want to say this season. So that's how the depth chart is. But in the case of Pedri, over the course even of a game, Pedri might play in 4 positions. He might play technically on the left wing in that 4-2-3-1. He might play as the quote unquote 10, and he might play in the double pivot, all in the same game. Totally possible. So guys like Pedri, Gundogan, Olmo, even some of the wingers like Pau Victor and Ferran Torres, you don't know exactly where they are going to fit in terms of minutes and time and positions. But I have them where I think that they're going to wind up being, or maybe even get their most starts when Hansi Flick decides to start them. Lewandowski, again, he's easy. I have him as the 9 starting. I do think Vitor Roque is sticking around Barcelona. I think we would have heard the team, or if he did agree to Saudi Arabia or something like that, I think the club just want to make money on him. And I don't think they're interested in loaning him. I think they're going to give him an opportunity to learn under Hansi Flick. Even if he doesn't play much this year, he is still just 19 years old. Or is he 20 now? Whatever it is, 19 or 20 years old. So I think when I say backup to Robert Lewandowski, I think it's Vitor Roque. But in truth, it's honestly probably Olmo as a false 9, Ferran Torres, or Pau Victor. Those guys likely are going to play even more minutes than Vitor Roque at the 9, but I don't know where else to put Vitor Roque. So that's the way I went about this. Left wing, it's really complicated here because I said Ferran Torres can play on the left. We might see Pedri play on the left. We might see Fermin Lopez playing, shading out to the left. We're not really sure. But I do know that Rafinha will definitely be on the left, and I think he's the starter on the left is Rafinha. Behind him is Dani Olmo, but as I said, Dani Olmo, I have him as a backup to Rafinha, but not really. I think he's going to start. I mean, he would probably be the guy who's going to start as a center forward or a false 9 for Robert Lewandowski. So he'll get starts there. I think he's also going to get starts on the right wing, even potentially. I think that's the least amount we'll see him between Lamine Yamal, Pau Victor, and Ferran Torres, which now I'm giving away the right wing, but I think that's actually pretty set in stone. The right wing depth chart is going to be Lamine Yamal. Obviously, the starter is probably going to start 70% of games if he's healthy, hopefully, even at 17. Another year for his legs, and then Pau Victor, and then Ferran Torres in that order is my belief. I mean, Olmo might also play more than Ferran Torres if he winds up being sold, but I do think Ferran will be sticking around as well. On the left wing, just to jump back there real quick, Dani Rodriguez, having just renewed his contract, I think Dani Rodriguez will be in the first team dynamic, be on the bench some. I don't know how much he'll actually play this year, but I think he's a quote unquote option at the left wing if the club doesn't bring in anybody in. And after signing that renewal and now being, I think, the every game starter for Barça Athletic, again, we could see him this season, or maybe next season he just does what Casado did in this season, where he plays all for Barça Athletic last year. Then he just makes the jump to the first team pretty defiantly this year. Now, that number 10 spot is really, really, really hard. I think it's Gundogan as a starter. I'm going to lock that in. Final answer. And then behind him, I think Fermin Lopez is the quote unquote backup there, because even if Olmo plays, he will. Olmo's going to play a lot more minutes than Fermin Lopez this year. Maybe, or Fermin Lopez is going to earn time, but Fermin Lopez is the quote unquote backup there because most of his time is going to come in the middle of that 4-2-3-1 where we saw Pablo Torre in the preseason. Pablo Torre was really just warming up that spot for Fermin Lopez this season as the backup behind Gundogan. And then we'll also see Pedri in that spot as well. Who knows how injuries are going to play out and things like that, but I could see 4 players. I don't know who besides Gundogan, Fermin Lopez, Pedri, and Olmo would possibly play in that number 10 role this year. And the youngsters that you'd love to see there, of course, Key Fernandez or Guillermo, well, he'll be playing probably a similar role for Barça Athletic this year. So I'm not worried about that. I'm more excited to see him in that spot. And then Kim Junet, we've seen him on the wing, but I also don't expect to see much of him this season at all. In the double pivot, the 5 names I'm going to hit you with are De Jong, and I put De Jong and Gabi as the starters, but because of injuries, because of Gabi coming back from that long-term injury, we don't even know about De Jong's injury, but we know with his salary, he's sticking around at least this year. I put them as the starters, but I think you're going to see a lot of rotation. Pedri could start next to Gabi. Pedri can start next to De Jong, and then Casado could be starting at times. I mean, he could even start 40% of the time and still not have as many minutes or whatever it is as the other ones who would be consummate starters. And then Marc Bernal, I think one thing I will say from AS Monaco, he made the mistake on the goal. I would love to see the heat map. I think this was the deepest position he also operated in this preseason, and one of the reasons why I think he struggled the most. Because Marc Bernal has been terrific throughout this preseason, being in a real double pivot, 2 6s or 2 8s, and Mark Costello being the one getting a little bit farther forward, but Bernal not really being a single pivot. There was a lot of times in this game where, yes, they were in a double pivot, but Bernal was so much farther. He was the one dictating diagonal play and looking to break lines, and he did that really well in the first half. So I was impressed by his good moments. I'm not so worried about his youthful, young, poor moments, because I think he will have even more protection as well along the back line as players come back in the fold. And as I said, I'm not too worried about that with the rotations and things like that in the preseason with him. But if I do say anything, Mayas Monaco, even with that mistake, I think he's a first team player, and he proved that in the preseason. He looks like he belongs. Left back here, without Valle, we already mentioned is gone. Balde, well, not gone yet, but I don't think he's going to be sticking around. Balde is a starter. I didn't love his preseason, but I think he can do better. I said that in the stock up, stock down, the Bolsa. Balde still doesn't look completely healthy. I'm excited to see what happens when he does. Gerard Martin seems like he's the backup to Balde, even though he's a starter for Barça Athletic. I don't know. Is he really the backup at that position? I'm not sure, because to go backwards in time here to the pivots, Christensen is also an option at the pivot. We saw him play both center back and double pivot in the preseason, but I do think because of Ronald Araujo's long-term injury that Christensen will remain as a center back for most, at least of the first half of the season, and then we'll see where injuries are at that point. With all that shuffling around, yeah, I mean, maybe it is Gerard Martin as the backup left back, and he'll just stick with the first team, but now you're talking too many Barça Athletic contracts to fit into that first team roster at times until they get every registered. So if Costello and Pau Victor are registered for the first team, again, you can only have 3 on the field at one time. And I think you can have 7 total in your squad, and it's something like 5 total in the game. I don't know the exact rules, but again, this is my preseason too, so I got to figure these things out at least by Saturday, I guess. But yeah, but Gerard Martin, he's clearly above Mika Faye on the depth chart. I didn't put Mika Faye as gone because I think he's still raw enough that the club really just wants to see him excel and be the man at the back for Barça Athletic, which totally makes sense. He's still very young. I know his agent was pushing for more, but if Barça can commit to having him agree to know, hey, the first team is mine next season, it'll be my spot, whether I'm left back, backup, or if I'm going to be in the center back rotation, because things are going to change with that depth chart, because we're about to look through, and it very well could. On the right side is Jules Koundé as the starting right back. I think the club is going for Cancelo, with Fort kind of not really taking hold of his spot in the preseason, with Gerard Martin on the other side and Cancelo being able to play on both sides. I think this all indicates to me that, and then Julian Araujo being sold as well to Bournemouth, Cancelo was coming back. And Man City made the deal. Julian Alvarez is gone from Man City. Big money deal for him to Atletico Madrid. And I think that when it comes to FFP and all that stuff, I think Man City are going to be willing to just say, all right, fine, here's another loan, very similar deal with João Cancelo. Here you go. Center back spots are kind of together, but also not, because Cubarsí has played a lot on the left, and I think he will likely play on the right quite a bit here in the first half of the year, with Inigo Martinez, I think, starting quite a bit on that left side with him. Ideally, I put here that it's Cubarsí and Araujo. Who knows how he's going to be in January and all that stuff. But Christensen also an option here. So those 4 are pretty much interchangeable. And Cubarsí, I think, is going to start more than Christensen, who cannot seem to go 90 minutes. I don't know if we really know the truth about this, but even this preseason did not go 90 minutes, was 45 minutes consistently. So we'll see what his kind of fitness is and how the club kind of worries about that, because it's hard to take one of your 5 spots and substitute out center backs consistently. I mean, even the pivot, to substitute out a pivot from game to game is rough, because you really want to have, especially with this 4-2-3-1 that Hansi Flick plays, you ideally would love the first 5 spots, as in the double pivot and the 3 in front, and then that number 9, you'd ideally, because of all the pressing that needs to be done, they're going to run more than the center back. So ideally, you would love to be able to have the option to substitute out any of those 5 throughout a game. So Christensen is there, and then Eric Garcia, I think, is sticking around, honestly. And then Sergio Dominguez as well. So Sergio Dominguez is going to be a rotation piece, maybe, but not really. He'll be with Barça Athletic. And then our goalkeepers, Ter Stegen Iñaki Peña, and Astralaga. Those are the goalkeepers in that order. I'd say no worries about that. So again, this was the depth chart that I'm going with for this season. I think everything could change in a week. This is stupid of me to put out, but hey, we've got another show coming out tomorrow. So a little more than 24 hours from now, but barely 24 hours from now. I might even release it on Wednesday. We'll see what the timing is. But Dani Olmo, I have a specialist talking to me about Dani Olmo who knows not him well, but it's an RB Leipzig fan. So we're going to talk about Dani Olmo and try to disprove some of those myths. So that's coming out this week. And then the next thing on the docket is Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Liga begins. The watch along description or show notes. Click on the link. It's on TIFO, and it would be a great joy and honor if everybody would have joined me there and get involved. Again, if you're somebody that I know and you have access to a camera and a microphone, you can even come on the watch along with me. We can have some conversations and discussion and have some fun there. So there's other things we can do with the watch along as well. And this and that are likely going to be replacing 5 headlines. I know people really enjoyed them, but they're not really going anywhere. It's just me, instead of 5 headlines to make it, I guess, easier for our brains, it's me kind of going with one big idea in post game from these watch alongs. But if you would watch the watch along, then you're getting a lot more time with me than you would have in those 5 headlines anyway. You kind of get to watch the 5 headlines happening live. So even if you're unavailable for Saturday, also just join on TIFO. That'll be a big help for me this season. Become a member. It's free to do. Hola culés. And as that kind of grows, and I'm hoping that's going to be another place for community. So if you're on Discord, if you're on the closed Facebook group, if you follow me on social media, either Instagram or X, or you're a Patreon, please, especially Patreons. I trust all of you. You wouldn't be Patreons if I didn't trust you. So if you're a Patreon, the extra benefit, I guess, is that I trust you completely. There is no vetting. I'm not worried about having you on. Request with your microphone, and you're going to come on the show as a Patreon for the watch along. So that is a special thing I can do for Patrons as well, as low as $3. And it helps me continue these shows as I try to figure out new ways to do content that make it easier on me as I just try to finish this move and figure it all out. And hopefully next time you see or hear from me, I've got my gallery wall back up. Still, we're blank in the moment if you were watching. But I think at this point, we're done with the show. I've talked about way too many players, and the preseason is over. And I think I need some kind of nap to prepare for Dani Olmo. And then we'll have the season beginning already on Saturday. You blink and you miss it. These years just go by. But that's a problem for another time. Because always, until next time, Forza Barça.